Hi, I'm Flavia.
And I'm Andy, and we are The Firm, your real estate concierge.
We help our clients buy and sell real estate in Wisconsin.
Welcome back, everyone, to another installment in our video series, How to Write a Winning Offer. Flavia, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about the right to cure.
The right to cure is a pretty complicated topic. Sometimes it's difficult to understand in a vacuum, but when we look at it in the context of individual transactions, I think it'll make a lot of sense to you. Hopefully, if you stick around to the end of the video, by then you'll understand how the right to cure can make the difference between being on the bottom of the stack or being on the top of the stack when it comes to writing offers in competition. Flavia, we typically associate the right to cure with a contingency in the offer. What contingency is that?
Well, the inspection, the home inspection. Now there is the radon testing contingency that you also have to give the right to cure or not, and appraisal.
Right. So those normally the biggest one that it has to, well, actually appraisal, it comes into play quite a bit as well this year, but the biggest one is inspection, right?
That's correct.
So you mentioned defects. When we write an offer with an inspection contingency, what if we find defects when we do the inspection? Well, first of all, we always find something. But what if we find defects that the seller didn't disclose, and now the buyer doesn't want to buy the house with those defects? So what do we usually try to do first?
What we can do is to renegotiate the price, or we can ask for the seller to repair the defects, or we can ask for closing credits, or we can have a lot of things we can do, but most common is the defects. So to cure the defects that was found in that report.
So I think I should back up for a second. The right to cure is an option that the buyers have we can decide when we're writing an offer, do we want to provide the right to cure to the sellers or not? So if we find something wrong with the house, and let's just say that they don't fix it or they don't want to fix it, and they don't have the right to cure, what would we would normally just write a notice of defect, right? So actually, I'm going to read a little part of the inspection contingency because it's actually written right into the offer. Says this offer is contingent upon a Wisconsin registered or Wisconsin licensed home inspector performing a home inspection of the property after the date on line 1, which is the day that we write the offer, that discloses no defects. Well, first of all, how often does that happen?
Never.
Never, right? So there's always some defects. So remember what we talked about. What is a contingency? An inspection contingency. What does it mean, Flavia? We promise to
buy the house if there is no defects.
Right. It's just like every other contingency. I promise to buy the house, but only if this. Well, here it's saying I promise to buy the house if there's nothing wrong, no defects with the house. And that means if there are defects, we don't have to buy the house, right? So one thing we've talked about in other videos, which was sellers really want security. They want the top price. They want all of that, right? But they want to know that once they take the house off the market and those days start counting down to closing, they want to know for sure that it's going to close, right? What if they know that there's the house might not be in the greatest shape, or they're worried that there might be something wrong that they're not even aware of? Well, that gives the buyer a lot of power to take that transaction down a road that they don't want to go down, right? So this is what the right to cure means. No matter what, if there are defects, the seller ultimately has the right to fix those problems so that you still have to move forward.
And I think you have to repeat that again, because that's the key for the right to cure, for people to understand. That's what they need to remember right there.
If the buyer gives the seller right to cure, the seller ultimately has the right to fix the defects that the buyer objects to before closing, and the buyer will still have to buy the house.
Mhm.
Okay, so we know that just when we do an inspection, things will come up. Most of the time, we'll try to negotiate between the buyer and seller to get some repairs done and things like that. But if those negotiations don't go well, or if they just can't see eye to eye, and the buyer finally gives up and says, well, okay, if you're not going to do things the way I want you to, or get these things fixed in the way that I want them done, I'll write you a notice of defect. If there is no right to cure, that notice of defect does what?
So it just killed the deals and the buyer has a way out.
Right. And in fact, let's look a little bit further down here. On line 206, it says, this contingency shall be deemed satisfied unless the buyer, within 15 days if left blank, after acceptance, delivered to the seller a copy of the written inspection report dated after the date on line 1 of this offer, and a written notice listing the defects identified in those reports to which the buyer objects. So if there is no right to cure and we do that, that will terminate the contract, because that's basically your way of invoking the inspection contingency. So we give them the report from the inspector along with a list on a notice form, a list of the things that we object to. If they have right to cure, we'll go a little bit further down on the contract to line 216, where it's our option. We can say if we do or do not give right to cure, and then it says if the seller has the right to cure, the seller may satisfy this contingency by number 1, delivering a written notice to the buyer within a set period of time after the buyer's delivery of the notice of defects, stating the seller's election to cure the defect. So Flavia, let's just talk real world. Let's say that you were buying my house and you found some plumbing problems underneath the kitchen sink. And we tried to negotiate over it, and you said, Andy, I want you to hire this plumber to fix it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to pay a plumber. It's going to cost $2,000 to get it fixed. I can do it myself, but I'm not going to pay a plumber. Well, you say, well, I'm not going to buy the house unless you do that. So then you issue a notice of defect. If I have right to cure, I can fix it myself, as long as I do a good and workmanlike manner. That's the term that is used to judge, if I held up my end of the bargain. Then on line 220 here, it says, I of course have to cure the defects in a good and workmanlike manner, and no later than 3 days before closing, I have to deliver to you a written report showing, detailing what was done, and presumably then during your final walkthrough, you would be able to confirm that that it was done. Very importantly, if you look on line 222, it says this offer shall be null and void if the buyer makes a timely delivery of notice of defect with the inspection report, and there is no right to cure, or I don't give you a notice in time that I elect to cure, or I actually give you a notice that says I do not elect to cure. So if you do not give the seller right to cure and you deliver that notice of defect, you have to be very careful, because if you send that, that does mean the deal is done, so they can walk away too. There's not going to be any more negotiation. In fact, you'd have to rewrite a new offer and start from zero if you were still interested in trying to pursue the property.
So
Flavia,
if you don't have the right to cure and I'm buying your house, so then I can back out, because if I send you a notice saying this is the defect I'm objecting to, so I can get out. That's the huge difference, and that's the big risk for sellers. they are out there selling this competitive market that, everybody wants their house. And when they don't have the right to cure and they have like 10 other offers that offer that, so
Right.
you know that they are going to opt for the one that is
So
that less risk.
that's absolutely right. So it, we we know that an offer that has the right to cure given is much more appealing to the seller. We should talk a little bit about what's the risk or what's the danger that the buyer takes on when they give the right to cure. Let's say that there is an area in the attic that has mold on the walls.
Mhm.
Okay. And we tell the sellers we want them to have it professionally remediated, but they say, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, we issue a notice of defect and they elect to cure it. Well, what is the actual criteria for a good and workmanlike manner of mold remediation? There's nothing to stop them from just taking a bucket of bleach water and rubbing it on the area and cleaning it up, but we don't know that that mold isn't going to come back. And we don't know that, they did a good job. We don't even know if they did it in a way that's safe for themselves. So there's always a danger that there could be a defect that arises, which really you don't want the seller to handle. So we like to offer right to cure. There's a little bit of a risk. I'm going to give you a special extra tip right here at the end here. If we get to a point where there's a problem, like there's a mold problem, and they won't remediate it the way we want them to, but they have right to cure,
Mm.
and we're afraid they're going to do pretty much if we give them a notice of defect just on the mold, we know they're just going to go, they'll be like, oh, big deal, I'll just wipe the mold off, and they still have to buy the house.
Well,
Well, do you think we just put the mold on the notice of defect?
no, we'll put every single defect that was in their report. So if they elect to cure, they have to cure all of those.
Right. So,
And that can
you
be
know,
very costly for a seller.
it could, and if they want to push our hand to to allow them to do one thing the way they want to, there could have been a dozen or 2 dozen things that we were willing to overlook. But now, if you're going to go down that road, Mr. Seller, we're going to put every little small thing that the inspection report exposed on the notice of defect. If you want to compel us to buy the house, not only are you going to have to take care of that mold issue, but you're going to have to fix every single outlet that might have reverse polarity or something, every little crack that we found in concrete. And that's the only reason we're telling you that is not because it's our job or our intention ever to be like difficult with a seller, but we want you to see that we can give someone right to cure, but there are some protections. It's not going to protect you 100% against somebody doing sort of a handyman special job on a little project, but at least we know that we're going to be pushing their hand into fixing every other little thing, and hopefully the house overall will be in a little bit better shape than it would have been if we didn't do that. So there you have it. That's another tip out of the vault from the firm on how to write a winning offer.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Till next time.
Ciao.